Well, welcome to the 700 Club. It's, quote, good for peace, good for security, and good for prosperity. That's what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu proclaimed about the peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. But listen, there's something about prophecy that I want to talk to you about, and I think it's key. You know, people want to know, when is Jesus coming back? When's the second coming? What about the rapture? What about all this stuff? But there's something in Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel, 38th chapter, that talks about a war by Gomer, Magog, Tubal, and Iran, Cush, Put, and so forth, that will come against Israel in the latter days. Now, that area came alive with this peace deal because Erdogan in Turkey is saying, I think it's terrible that these people made an agreement with Israel. But what is the significance? Again, here's the key. Ezekiel said Israel is going to be living in the land in peace. It will be in unwalled villages, and a coalition led by Turkey and Iran and Rush, some of the Gomer, some of the area, that Gomer, you see, it's mostly in Turkey, but down there in Africa, you've got Put, which is Libya and Algeria, and you've got Cush, which is the lower Sudan and Ethiopia. Those people are going to come together against Israel in the last days. And that's not the second coming of Christ, but it's something that I think is going to happen. And I think it's going to something we need to be aware of. Now let's go to Chris Mitchell, who can give us more explanation from Jerusalem.
On Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saw only good results from the historic agreement.
Peace is a good thing, and this peace unites two of the most advanced economies in the world, Israel and the United Arab Emirates, and two of the most moderate. We're fighting Iran and the radicals who are trying to overthrow the entire order in the Middle East, subjugate peoples, propagate terrorism. So this is good for peace, good for security, good for prosperity. I think it's good for the United States and good for Israel.
But not everyone in the region agrees. Iran flat out condemned it. The Palestinian Authority called the UAE traitors, and President Erdogan threatened to break off diplomatic relations with the United Arab Emirates.
Exact suspects that you would expect to hate this deal.
Best-selling author and Middle East expert Joel Rosenberg tells CBN News Turkey's reaction to the peace deal is revealing.
Why is that interesting? Because Turkey has a relationship. They have full normalization with us here in Israel. So the idea that the would-be Sultan of Turkey is condemning a Muslim state for creating a full normalization with Israel that he already has, it's ridiculous and it's hypocritical. But it's indicative of the fact that Erdogan is taking his country out of the Western moderate camp into the Iranian Islamist, more radical camp. And that's a long-term, very serious problem.
Rosenberg also believes this Abraham Accord has prophetic undertones.
We watch in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38, 39, what's known as the eschatological future war of Gog and Magog, is the Arab states being very calm and quiet towards Israel. Israel reconstructed, peaceful, prosperous, calm, secure, and then a Russian-Iranian-Turkish alliance forming against Israel.
The Bible talks about a confederation of nations, including Put, Cush, Persia, Magog, Gomer, and Tubal coming against Israel.
Now, I'm not saying the war of Gog and Magog is imminent. I'm saying is the trend lines of peace in the Middle East with a Russian-Iranian-Turkish axis. This is exactly where we're heading. This is the trajectory, and it's something that should cause all Christians to watch carefully and to continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
President Erdogan and Iran both have their sights set on Jerusalem. Erdogan said recently he wants to liberate the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and Iran wants to conquer the Holy City. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, that's one to watch, and it's going to happen. But Erdogan, you know, if you read the book of Revelation and you see the churches of Asia, every one of those things is in modern-day Turkey, every single one of them. And so when Paul was talking about going to Asia and so forth, he was going to Turkey. Turkey was key in the biblical prophecy, and now Erdogan, he seemed to be okay. He came over here, and the president said, well, isn't he a fine leader and so forth? But Erdogan has taken over the most important church of the Eastern Orthodox, the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, and he made it into a mosque. It was, you know, secular, but it's a Christian organization. And Erdogan is now making noises that he might be the leader of another caliphate. He wants to be the caliph. He wants to be the new leader of the Muslim people. And Turkey is key in biblical prophecy. So just keep your eyes on that, because I think if something is coming up next prophetically, I think Ezekiel 38 is probably it. This is not the second coming of Christ, but it is a coalition of people that are focused on Turkey, focused on Iran, and focused on Russia, at least those Muslim states at the border of Russia. And they will come against Israel. So the question of how soon, when, but that's coming up next, and just you read your paper and it'll be there. Well, to nobody's surprise, in other news, the Democrats pulled out all the stops last night, trashing President Trump in a desperate attempt to gain the White House. John Jessup has more.
Pat, former First Lady Michelle Obama was the main act last night, delivering the keynote speech among other speakers who attracted attention. Eric Phillips has more on the first night of the Democratic National Convention.
A number of big names highlighted night one of this virtual convention. Among them, so many average Americans spoke that the common man seemed to take center stage. Still, the night will be remembered by the closing speech from former First Lady Michelle Obama.
Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country. He has had more than enough time to prove that he can do the job, but he is clearly in over his head. He cannot meet this moment. He simply cannot be who we need him to be for us. It is what it is.
It was a speech meant to appeal to humanity while making the case it's a necessary quality missing from the current Oval Office.
Whenever we look to this White House for some leadership or consolation or any semblance of steadiness, what we get instead is chaos, division, and a total and utter lack of empathy.
The virtual event was a mix of live and taped segments.
We the people.
Including testimonials from citizens like Kristen Orquiza, who lost her father to COVID-19.
My dad was a healthy 65-year-old. His only pre-existing condition was trusting Donald Trump, and for that, he paid with his life.
There were Republicans and former Republicans who spoke in support of Biden, including one who ran for president himself.
In normal times, something like this would probably never happen. But these are not normal times.
I've registered as a Democrat for the first time in my life.
We are the United States of America.
And at each opportunity, the party faithful raked President Trump over the coals for his handling of race relations and the pandemic.
Donald Trump didn't create the initial division. The division created Trump. He only made it worse.
Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Trump golfs.
We know that what's going on in this country is just not right. This is not who we want to be.
The night opened and closed with prayer, obviously carefully orchestrated to appeal to the faith audience, believed by both sides to be a key demographic in this election. Eric Phillips, CBN News.
Thanks, Eric. Pat, the speakers last night pulled no punches.
Well, when you think of the Obama administration, he was rivaling Jimmy Carter as one of the worst, if not the worst, president in the history of America. And the failures of the Obama administration are just legendary. And the promises he made and the lies that he made, if you like your health care, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it. All lies. And you go down the list of things where he promised stuff and it didn't happen. And his incompetence is just appalling. And our trouble around the world was laid to the feet of this man who refused to back up anybody. It's just unbelievable what they have to say. But that's politics. And, you know, in the old days, these conventions were actually exciting because they didn't know who the candidate of the party is going to be. I mean, they had to be vote after vote after vote. The same was true with Franklin Roosevelt. And I think his third term was a question of was he going to get the nomination? And they weren't sure. And so various leaders had to come forward and blocks of vote, and they were trading in the back rooms, and it was exciting. Now these conventions are nothing but a showcase for the parties, and the networks are not giving it the same prime time they used to. But this one is pretty sad. And I don't know what Donald Trump's going to do, but maybe the Republicans will have something. They were going to Charlotte, now we're going to Jacksonville. I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to have any kind of a convention, virtual or otherwise.
Well, I suppose they'll do the same thing that was done last night, and they'll talk about what they've accomplished.
Yeah, well, talking about what you've accomplished is one thing, attacking the other guy is something else. And but I remember that convention where Ted Kennedy led the people in a chant, "Where was George? Where was George?" I mean, it was kind of interesting. And Edward Dirksen said, "We're not sick. This economy is not sick. We're just, we're not even ill-disposed. We're just badly managed." I mean, it was a great line. And there was a lot of fun in those things, but, you know, no longer. So we'll see what happens. But just prepare yourself for a barrage of false information because it's coming down the pike really hard. John?
Pat, back here in Washington, the House of Representatives will meet Saturday to vote on a bill limiting changes at the Postal Service. This comes as Postmaster General Louis DeJoy agreed to testify before Senate committee this Friday and before the House next Monday. Democrats accused DeJoy of working at the president's behest to remove mail sorting equipment and mailboxes in an attempt to suppress mail-in ballots ahead of the November election. Some Republicans are raising concerns that mail-in voting will lead to fraud.
Our elections are sacred. Men and women have died for them and the right to vote. And to do this is disgraceful.
With respect to universal mail-in voting, it's just like a total catastrophe what's happening.
Last week, the Postal Service warned 46 states that mail-in ballots may not arrive in time to count in the election. And Pat, the president, at first opposed more funding to bolster the post office, but has since reversed course.
Well, you know, folks, in the old days, I used to go down to the polling place, and I would pick up whatever they had, and I'd give them my name, and they'd check it off the roll. Then I'd go into the little booth, and I would cast my ballot, and then I'd get a little sticker to say I voted, and I'd leave. I don't know why we still can't do that. You know, so sure, COVID is out there, but you can wear a mask and have social distancing, and they can keep people separate. But the idea of mailing willy-nilly millions of ballots to people, some of whom are dead, some of them who are not on the rolls, some of them who are illegal, to do that is a recipe for utter disaster. And the post office can't possibly keep up with it. And furthermore, it will be obviously an opportunity for fraud. I mean, I watch ABC News, and they say the president claims without justification. It's always without justification that there's been fraud. There's plenty of justification. They've found cases right now on the rolls of people who have moved from the state, people who are dead, people, you know, have put in fraudulent claims, and it's obviously easy to vote 2 or 3 times. They say vote often and, you know, vote early and vote often. I mean, you're not supposed to vote but once. But with these mail-ins, you can put in a ballot, and then you can go personally to the poll, and they're not going to be able to check all that. I mean, it's going to be unbelievable, the amount of fraud. Why can't people put on their masks, drive to the polling place, and vote personally? We talk about we've got to make the post office give them billion. They want to give them $5 billion, I think, dollars to beef up their efforts. And even with that, it won't be enough. So it's going to be an open door to incredible fraud. And with the counting system they've got, we won't know who the winner is of many, many races, including the presidency, for maybe weeks or even months. And that isn't something we want in a democracy. John?
Pat, to the coronavirus, COVID-19 is now the third leading cause of death here in the United States after heart disease and cancer. So far, more than 5.4 million Americans have contracted the virus. Nursing home cases are increasing dramatically, up 80% in just a couple of months. Meanwhile, the debate over reopening schools continues to rage. The University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill is changing course, canceling in-class instruction after an outbreak on campus. 130 students there coming down with COVID-19. And Pat, this is just 1 week after fall classes began.
I am pleased to report, as the Chancellor of Regent University, that with our staff and with the students, there has not been one single case of COVID-19, not one. And for that, I am just grateful, because that's the protection of God. But I mean, the region is opening up school, and people are coming back, and everything's all clean and nice and safe, but not one case.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
May it
not
stay.
one.
May it stay so.
Yeah. And North Carolina State's got some problems. And UNC has got some problems, and I think down in Georgia they've got a number of problems. Many, many schools have been forced to shut. They opened and they shut back down. But as I said yesterday, I think we're really in trouble not being able to socialize. I mean, we really miss the idea that you can go out and meet with friends, that you can go to a restaurant and have a meal, or that these students can go to class with one another. And it's going to do terrific damage. We need somehow to open schools, but we cannot open them with these mobs of people with no masks all getting together and then catching this terrible disease.